Good morning and welcome to July's BCP Cabinet meeting. Very much welcome to anybody who's joining online or watching on catch up. Okay, so I'm going to go straight to our Democratic Services Officer to refer to the housekeeping document. Sarah.
Good morning. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking and mute or turn off your microphone when you are not talking. If you are accessing via Teams and you would like to speak on an item, please indicate by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, exit the building by where the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point along Braidley Road under the flyover. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. And just to say, we do think we might have a fire alarm normal this morning, so we'll be prepared for that. It will be a drill. Okay, thank you. So then we move on to apologies, and one I received is Councillor Bobby Dove. Are we aware of any other apologies? No? Okay, great. So we'll move on to items 2, declarations of interest. I think it's worth declaring that I'm a board member of some of our council companies in terms of the Seascape report later, so I'll declare that. Any other, Phil?
Yep, same for me, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Brooks. Nigel?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In relation to item 9, I'm a similar director of Seascape South Limited and also Bournemouth Building Maintenance Limited. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Upton.
Thank you. Similar, item 9, I'm a director of BBML.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Butt, Judy. See, your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Barron, apologies.
Okay, great. We'll note those. Thank you. So let's move on to agenda item 3, which is confirmation of minutes, which I will propose. And Phil, I believe you're seconding. Thank you. Okay, and I've got Councillor Butt, Judy.
Yes, me again, which is ironic because I was in fact at the last meeting, but I'm not marked as having attended. So if I could be added, please. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and just confirm we can. Yeah, so we'll make that amendment now. Perfectly happy with that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Jude. Any other comments? Then all those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is passed. Okay, so then we go to agenda item 4. So there have been, which is public issues. There are no questions or petitions submitted on this occasion. 2 statements have been submitted into relation to agenda item 11, the local plan update and way forward. And look, I believe those statements we read out. We're going to read them out at the item, or would you like to read them out now? Okay, great. So we'll read those 2 statements out now. Thank you.
Thank you. So both of the statements relate to agenda item 11, the BCP local plan update and way forward. The first statement comes from Adrian Chapman-Law, and his statement reads as follows. We learned from item 11 on today's agenda that 78% of local plan respondents support a step change in active travel, while residents feel that cycle lanes should be top priority on main roads and better thought out. Can I therefore urge the portfolio holder for sustainability and transport to please reply to my email of 20th of July, which raises numerous concerns surrounding the Bear Cross to Northbourne roundabout cycle lane proposals. That email also seeks a timescale for the works, and I'd also like to know if the scheme can still be refined or adapted in any way. The second statement comes from Sarah Boyce on the same agenda item. And the statement reads as follows. Part 3.5 of the local plan report describes a safe, connected, accessible transport network as a BCP priority, and this is supported by 77% of survey respondents. I hope that in the months ahead, your local plan working group considers the woeful bus service from Christchurch to Winkton, twice daily on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays only, with no service on public holidays. Please be mindful too that BCP gave one operator a grant to enhance its service in this area, but that rendered another operator's daily service uneconomic, and the latter ceased. So careful, joined-up thinking is required on this issue.
Thank you very much for both those statements, and we'll have an opportunity to talk to them when we're at that item on the agenda. Okay, so I'll move now to agenda item 5, which is recommendations for the over and scrutiny committees. We haven't had any recommendations through. So there's an opportunity now for any of the over and scrutiny chairs to raise anything. Otherwise, we'll go to the agenda at certain points in the agenda. We're not seeing that, so I'll move to agenda item 6. Which I'm very happy to formally propose myself. This is the end of year corporate performance report for 21-22. So it's a really interesting and detailed report we'll have all seen. What this does do is give us the opportunity to review. We set a corporate strategy and some clear targets in terms of what we want to deliver in relation to that. And this is the opportunity to see how we've actually performed. I'll just update effectively. We had what we've done as an administration. We came in with our big plan, so we've refreshed the corporate strategy with that further level of ambition. So it's effectively a stretched corporate strategy, and the vast majority of actions in here are delivered and on track to be delivered. So I have a huge debt of gratitude to portfolio holders and the rest of our officer team who've delivered what is absolutely a brilliant level of performance in what has been over the last 2 years really difficult times. We have had there are a small number of mitigation reports which are in the appendices here. A lot of these significantly in relation to where COVID effectively and a catch up from COVID has knocked some performance off, but there's a minority of those, and the vast majority of performance is good. So I'm very thankful to that. Just will also mention that I think for the first time this has been cross-referenced to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the Levelling Up Goals. So really showing how local government in general and this council in particular is really trying to step forward now across our responsibilities around sustainability, sustainable development, and how we're trying to government's agenda around levelling up to make sure we deliver for all of our communities. So. And last thing in my introduction, there is a separate paper on equality and diversity progress, which are captures our equality journey, and I think it was really useful to sort of be reminded and see some of that report and the journey we've been on, particularly in the last couple of years. We've made equality a real I believe you're able to second, Phil.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Really happy to second this, and I'll talk to the dynamic places element of the report as well, because obviously these reports are really useful to monitor progress. There is a temptation to only look at the areas where you're not doing very well, but actually what's really clear from this report is that there's a number of areas where we're not just performing to target, but we are exceeding target. So just to take the dynamic places as an example, on almost every single metric we are either at or exceeding our target. So you look at the number of businesses that are in the area growing, exceeding target, and up. The footfall in the 3 town centres exceeding target and massively up, and actually well ahead of pre-pandemic levels in most of the areas now. Completed homes on council-owned lands up and above target. Major applications, minor applications, and other applications terminal on time, all up and most well ahead of target. In even things like our skills agenda, the number of high-level qualifications, NVQ4s, that are achieved across the BCP region, up and ahead of target again. So really positive news, showing that we're really bouncing back positively from the pandemic, but also the number of plans that we put in place are clearly working. There is one exception in the dynamic places, which is around the Bournemouth Development Company, but actually that's a positive story as well, because the reason it's in the exception report is that we've yet to receive the funds from one of our developments, which is the West Six Mansions development, and that has been primarily because of the delayed period of time for construction due to COVID. But actually, on the flip side, that delay has really worked in our favour, because obviously as the area has bounced back and as house prices have moved up, we've actually seen a big increase in the gross development value for this development, around £800,000 extra than when we were expecting. So whilst we're now not going to get those funds in until next year, rather than the end of this year, we will be significantly better off than we were before. And of course, as colleagues will know, we get 50% of the profits generated from that scheme. So all the other areas, pretty much we're ahead of target and doing really well, particularly on our economic development front. And actually the one area where we're not, we're getting more money than we expected anyway.
Great, really encouraging. Thank you very much for that. So, do any other members of Cabinet wish to speak to this paper? Councillor White, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Lead. I'd like to make a few comments on children's social care. Firstly, I'm pleased to see a number of really positive indicators. The percentage of repeat referrals is down, and we've also seen an increase in the number of foster carers. However, as you'll see in the pack, there
Apologies for the short delay there. We obviously had our fire alarm we were expecting. We will look into whether that needs to happen when we've got Cabinet meetings and any other meetings being broadcast going forward. Thank you. Councillor White, if you could continue, please.
Yeah, thank you. I just commented on a number of positive indicators in children's social care. However, as you can see in the pack, there is an exception report on timeliness of assessments. Our target for this is 80% within 45 days. Your fourth quarter, which is the period of this performance report, we achieved 61%. We're now back to 79%. So in fact, we're still not quite there. We're a percentage point short. I mean, the main reason we've got into this situation was a major spike in referrals after COVID, which led to a huge backlog of open assessments. In June last year, we had 922 open assessments. We're now down to just over 600. And we also introduced an additional assessment team to help deal with this backlog and also put much greater emphasis on quality. Managers now are not signing off poor quality assessments. So I think it's fair to say we are on the right trajectory on this particular measure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I think it's absolutely worth teasing out, isn't it, that the scale of referral has massively increased through COVID. So I think it just sort of underlines that now's the time for us to really to stand up and be there for our community. So it's some of the really heartwarming stories through our COVID catch-up fund was able to see. So I'm really glad we actually put some intervention in at the time, and we need to keep putting that intervention in, don't we? So so thanks for your work on this, Mike. Okay, Councillor Nicola Green.
Thank you, Leader, and good morning, everybody. Councillor Dove has, as we're aware, given her apologies for today's meeting, so my comments refer both to her areas and my own, and they're broadly focused in the connected communities stream. The Cleaner, Greener, Safer agenda was introduced as a priority by this administration in the autumn of 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. We recognise the need to targeted and early intervention, particularly to ensure that there were no long-lasting repercussions post-COVID, particularly around domestic abuse and antisocial behaviour. On a positive note, according to ONS data, Dorset has improved 3 places in the past year to become the 7th safest place to live in England. Antisocial behaviour itself has decreased in this past year by 25%. And in contrast, there was a spike in the reporting of it during COVID, but the decrease shows that ASB is at its lowest since before 2017. However, we recognise that there are still pockets of unacceptable behaviour where residents are left feeling deeply uncomfortable. Our message in these incidents is always to report it. Every report to the council and to the police aids the collection of intelligence, which in turn informs future targeted reporting. You might not always see what looks like an immediate response, but the collective impact of all those individual reports is crucial in leading to action and enforcement. Some of the positive impacts we've had are the increase in the recruitment of CSAS officers, words we often use. These are BCP community officers who have accredited powers given to them by Dorset's Police's Chief Constable, and they've been actively patrolling our hotspots and engaging with those who come to our attention. We've also invested in security patrols who will support CSAS officers and will patrol areas where there are reports and incidents of ASB, such as our parks, our beaches, as part of our ongoing summer response. Wake-up calls to our unwelcome overnight visitors on the beach and parkland are just one example. This isn't about signage, let's be clear, this is about people's behaviour. The consequences scheme has been used to proactively work with young people. It's a 3-step plan for young people to address any unwelcome behaviours via a multi-agency approach, ensuring they're appropriately helped to stay away from the youth justice system wherever possible. And I know Councillor White will speak to that later on the agenda. Lastly, we've also invested significantly in diversionary activities for our children and young people to take away from them some of those temptations which could lead to ASB. In other areas, the domestic abuse strategy is well embedded within our working practices, but this is a continuing journey. We know that there are still families out there experiencing domestic abuse, which isn't just about violence and can be displayed and have a huge impact by coercive and controlling behaviour. Therefore, we urge anyone experiencing domestic abuse to please come forward and receive the help, the guidance and the support which is ready for you. We were very pleased to have been awarded a purple flag once again in January of this year for our nighttime economy. We continue to work very closely with the town's entertainment values through Town Watch to collaboratively draw upon resources to ensure that everyone coming to our town centres for the nighttime economy can do so safely. But we are aware that post-COVID, there's been a small increase in the number of physical assaults, which tend to occur late at night where there are licensed premises. For context, violence includes anything from a bop on the nose right the way through to more serious incidents. We do have a new community safety partnership strategy paper coming forward in the autumn, and that'll look at new priorities, which includes a new approach to combating incidents involving a risk of violence. As an administration, we are already committed to the installation of more CCTV cameras, which will further expand in our CCTV strategy paper, which is also coming forward in the autumn. And also further investment in lighting in areas where users can feel vulnerable. Bit of a whistle-stop tour, leader, but some important stuff in there. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Some real priority areas. Thank you for reflecting on those. I've got Councillor Ampton and Councillor Kelly. Karen.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to make a few comments about our fulfilled lives priority, and overall performance is good. We've been really successful in obtaining government grants, which have enabled us to work on projects both new and ongoing to support our homelessness prevention. Our best performance is in tackling homelessness and preventing rough sleeping. Half the actions are complete and the remaining are on target. We're putting renewed focus into reducing emergency accommodation and providing clear pathways for people with complex needs. The 3 performance measures which have exception reports have robust actions in place to improve that performance. And I'll just briefly mention a couple. So homelessness households in bed and breakfast accommodation, where we've got our CNAS programme, which I'm sure my colleague will speak more about later, and that will increase property numbers for our homeless households. We're developing a multidisciplinary team which will work to reduce bed and breakfast or hotel use. We've got a temporary accommodation strategy. We've got a rough sleeper initiative, and that's tailored support and alternative forms of emergency accommodation. Our homelessness reduction board is truly effective, and I just must pay tribute here to our colleague Hazel Allen, who isn't with us today, but she is a key member of that board, and it is true partnership working and it's achieving really good outcomes. Our rough sleeping numbers, we've got a host of actions already in place, and I don't intend to go through them all. But Housing First is a model that we heard more about at Housing Conference, something that we're already doing, looking to step up that, as well as other pathways to help people who are rough sleeping on our streets. We have a third one, which is a percentage of positive outcomes for families. No fault evictions have risen, and the private rented sector market is challenging. Obviously, again, we are building and buying as much as we can, but the market is a challenge at the moment. We have an action plan for private rented sector in development, and that will help promote early help offers. We're planning a landlord conference so we can engage with those landlords and do what we can to stop those no-fault evictions and keep families suitably housed. We will aim to reduce our households who are in bed and breakfast accommodation. We have a target of 6 weeks, which is a nationally mandated target, and we need to really try to keep to that. It's really challenging, but we're doing what we can. But I would say that it's just completely unacceptable that any family should be in bed and breakfast accommodation. And we just put spades in the ground on a project which Councillor Broadhead and I were at a couple of weeks ago at Herbert Avenue, which will provide housing for families who are in need, and that was a great scheme. And if we could replicate that and you know, have it open tomorrow, we would. It's so much needed. Moving on from that, I'd just like to bring to Cabinet's attention, we've got about 93% of our domiciliary care, nursing and residential services which are rated good or outstanding by CQC, and that's great. We'd like it to be even higher, and we've got a range of measures to sort of monitor and improve that sector. So overall, although we have 3 exception reports, there are very, very good reasons. A lot of the reasons are to do with the pandemic, of course, but robust actions in place to address the issues. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you for that assurance. And one point I'll just tease out: we've got a matter audit and governance committee on Thursday when we're talking about our increasing our resources, availability for the council to invest in things like, you know, homes and housing and homes. So it's really interesting to tie that to what you're saying about the strain in the market at the moment and no fault evictions and the amount of people we've got in bed and breakfast. So if we can increase our resources to, and support our teams into being able to purchase more homes, build more homes, I think that's absolutely great. So and then the other side of that equation is we'll be delivering more homes and more assets for future generations to benefit from as well. So interesting to see how those 2 parts tie up. Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Kelly. Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, I just wanted to very briefly talk about 2 of the sections on there. The connected communities section, where we've encouraging intergenerational interactions and reducing loneliness and isolation are completely on target and above. We are doing a lot of work on that kind of thing, particularly with our age-friendly aspirations. I went to a conference in Birmingham recently with an officer to start garnering more ideas about what we can do to make our towns more friendly for elderly people. And actually, age friendly is not only about elderly people, it's about everyone, and people who have disabilities or needing extra help with various things. Also with connected communities, we've been able to employ quite a number of new community development workers who are currently, since the end of Q4 that we're talking about here, in Q1 they have been on the ground working with those communities, looking for the strengths, because we work to a strengths-based ethos and wanting to encourage those and work on them so that we build resilience in our communities. Because later on in the Fulfilled Lives section, it talks about food and kind of problems that there are with access to food at the moment. We have a thriving access to food forum, which we've just got a significant amount of government funding to enhance it and expand it. And it's not just about food banks at all, it's about all kinds of helping people to be able to manage their money so that they can eat healthily, and learning how to cook on a budget and all sorts of other things that is really going to help people in that respect. So it's a multi-agency partnership working with many people, third sector organisations right across the patch. So I think that's going to be really helpful. Thank you, Leader.
That's absolutely great. Thank you very much. Okay, do I have any other Cabinet colleagues wishing to comment on this paper? I think we've had a really rich discussion on it. No, okay, fine. So just in summing up, I'd just like to thank everybody again for the work that's been done in these areas, and I'm sure Graham Farrant will pass it on to our officer team as well. Okay, so all those in favour of the report as put, please show. Thank you. It's passed. Okay, so we will move on to agenda item 7, which is the Smart Place strategy. Phil.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Really pleased to bring forward this paper. We've had this in hand for a little while, and we've actually gone a little bit ahead of the smart place strategy already. And one of the items that we reference, which is the significant investment into rollout of full fibre, is already in train. We've got another paper that's going to be dealing with the update of that shortly. And the reason we went early on that is because we had a particular opportunity to really get on with that because of the Futures Fund that we created. So suddenly we're able to step into that field and put investment in place. But this is the bigger picture. This is when people ask what smart place is. Well, smart place is trying to make life better for people using a number of smart place interventions. It can bring tremendous economic benefits to the area, and there's a lot of ways in which a local authority can get involved in that. What I really like about the smart place strategy that Adrian Hale's fantastic team has put together on this is that not only is it on the front foot and really innovative compared to most areas across the country, and I'll talk about the interventions and the strategies within it a little bit more in a moment, but actually within the business plan for this, it seeks to secure major private investment so that actually we'll have not only plans in place, but a financially self-sustaining business model. So rather than, although the local authority can very much be on the front foot of the strategy and some direct interventions, what we're really doing is harnessing some of the fantastic local businesses that we've got that are really at the forefront of these, and using the council's resources to bring that together and make some absolutely really impactful interventions that are going to help to improve lives, particularly as, and perhaps my colleague Toby Johnson might talk about this later. One of the real areas where the BCP region needs some levelling up is in the digital area and skills in particular. So the strategy here, it's quite comprehensive, but I'll just bring out a few of the major points. It talks about how we're going to use our commitment within the big plan to actually put this into action. And the Smart Place programme is delivered in three areas. First of all, the Smart Place pilot in the Lansdowne part of central Bournemouth, which was funded by the Dorset LEP and is now completed. For colleagues' reference, that has encouraged a tremendous number of businesses to relocate to the BCP region, because as part of that Smart Place pilot, we were the first place, I believe, in the country to have our own private 5G network that businesses could come and trial new innovative technology on. And we've had a number of instances of businesses choose to invest in the area because of that direct intervention. We've also got the Boscombe Smart Place demonstrator, put £2.7 million ongoing into that, and that's a pretty central part of our Boscombe Towns Fund regeneration project, showing that regeneration isn't just about buildings, but it's about smart interventions as well, and improving people's lives through digital means. And then finally, the full rollout across BCP, which is subject to private investment, talked about a little bit more in the paper. And then the four key smart place interventions brought out within this are the gigaspeed fibre networks, private 5G and wireless networks, place-based data site in insight platform, using our data in a much cleverer way to help improve people's lives, and then the smart place applications and services, which again is already being trialled on the ground primarily through Boscombe. Kind of a little bit of background of each of those. The gigabit fibre network we'll talk about in a minute. We've already put some significant investment into that. Brings forward a very good IRR, internal rate of return. And again, as we'll talk about in the next paper, we've got significant private interest in getting involved within that. We're looking to seek about £27 million of private investment for 5G and wireless networks across the area, again with a really high rate of return. So again, we are looking to secure significant private interest in that, and I imagine we will. Again, we're looking for private investment into the place-based data insights program. This is one of the areas that I think is really, really interesting, using our anonymized data really carefully and cleverly to help to improve people's lives through commercial intervention. And then finally, the smart place applications and services, and again looking for significant investment to use some of the work that's already happening from really incredible innovative digital companies to really bring forward our smart place. Happy to take any questions, Chairman, but I think if we've been singled out as one of the exemplars for a number of years, including in the preceding authority days where the gestation of this happened, for being right on the forefront of digital intervention and smart place and smart city work. This strategy embeds it fully in a much higher rate into the future, and significantly is drawing the private interest in, so that we can leverage that commercial opportunities of that to make sure that we not only improve people's lives in a digital way, but we do it without costing the council taxpayer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and yeah, very happy to second this actually. And it's just on that point, I think there's an absolute understanding that smart places will change lives and be more positive. We're at a integrated care board meeting literally last night. We were talking about how to smart places, smart tech, and data differently to actively improve people's lives. The big issue is there's not statutory responsibility or funding for it. So it's about up to areas themselves to work out how they're going to actually start to bring these benefits to local communities. And I think it's a real mix and mix that we probably wanted to see at the outset of the Futures Fund, where the Futures Fund can come in and support infrastructure in a way that allows us to actually get going and first, but then the innovative business model you reference in the report as well. So it's a mixture. So we're effectively delivering this on this and able to bring this forward because we step forward with the Future Fund, our local government reorganisation dividend, and alongside the market as well. So it effectively means we're one of the first councils and places in the country to be leading on some of this stuff, which is only going to be great for local people and future economy people coming here to work. So yeah, very happy to support and second. Okay, so let me go to the wider councillor membership now before I come back to cabinet, and I've got Councillor Andy Hadley. Morning, Andy.
Good morning, Leader. Thank you. Yeah, I've talked about smart places before, and in principle, I think it's great that we are looking at this. But I'm really concerned about particularly the first two strands, the fibre gigabit fibre network and the Wi-Fi. And for gigabit fibre, we have City Fibre digging up all our roads right around the conurbation at the moment. We've got Virgin Media long-standing, and obviously BT Openreach, and the services that those three provide. And I suppose the question is, what can the council actually add to that? That the market is not doing. And I think there are two areas. One is about areas of deprivation if they're choosing not to go into those areas, and we want to see services there. And the other is rurality. So it might be places like Burton and Herne on the edge of our conurbation that are not otherwise priorities for the private sector. But otherwise, we have choice already. We have the private sector providing. So our need to do that is not there. And our need to invest our scarce funding, particularly when the source of the funding is under some concern, I think is also not there. Similarly with 5G, yes, the test bed is interesting for the university and for startups, and I think that's good to support. But the idea that we're going to spend significant amounts of money on that when there's 5G masts popping up all over the conurbation, again, we should be looking at the gaps, the areas that are not priorities, rather than trying to replicate what the others do. The third area that's really important is, as the Deputy Leader said, is around data and the smart use of information and data and creating that source. It's interesting you're talking about the Integrated Care Board and the work there, because there's already a really good Dorset intelligence and insight service amongst partners within the Dorset health and social care community. And the skills and expertise that we have in the public sector there are really good. And I think BCP is not levering those. We don't have to go to market. We don't have to create some joint venture company in order to exploit that. And it's really important that we don't, because this is information about our services, our people, and our area. And then when you get on to the fourth priority, apps, some of the apps that we're producing, things like the tip app, is trivial. It's telling you that there's a traffic light between busy, not busy, and halfway in between right now. But you need to know, what's it going to be like this afternoon? What's it going to be like tomorrow? We need to add intelligence, and I don't see that happening with some of these apps. The beach app is better, and interestingly, when I looked at it, it actually had information about the town centre car parks. We don't publicise that, or certainly not aware. I wasn't aware of that previously. But now if you go on it, it gives you a random selection of resorts, of which BCP is just one. So by leaving it to the private sector to steer that, we've lost that sort of that impact as BCP and that ability to take you straight to information about our beaches and our car parks and our other facilities. So I think, we lose control by passing it out to the private sector, and I think we should be smarter about what we're doing. But also at a time when we can't answer the telephone, we should be prioritising those things that are really important to BCP, to our residents, and perhaps not just playing with toys or ideas that people are coming to us fairly randomly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. I will bring in Councillor Butler and then open up the debate. Diana.
Thank you, Leader. Mentioned some concerns about 5G in particular. The pilot in Lansdowne, we haven't had any data issued about the pilot results on this, how it was monitored, the results of the impact on the local community. We haven't seen any of that. The health risks for 5G, although a lot of people say there are no health risks, this hasn't been proven. Some countries have actually banned it. So we need to know about that. And there's been no consultation for the public of whether people across BCP want 5G in particular. Most people can get the coverage that they need at the moment, especially domestic use. So it's not as if we live in a mountainous area where you get big blackout areas where you can't get any connection. So I'm very worried about that, and I don't think that the public have been consulted enough on this. And quite a few residents have said they've got ample connection already. I just think this needs to be looked into better. To be the first of local authorities to bring this in doesn't mean to say it's the right thing to do. Sometimes you have to have a bit of caution. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for those comments as well, and I'm sure Councillor Broadhead will respond to both of those as we get to it. Okay, do we have any other now come to members of Cabinet? Do I have any members of Cabinet like to speak to this paper? Okay, no, fine. So perhaps Councillor Broadfield, you could sum up and answer some of those questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to colleagues for the questions. I'll deal with Councillor Hadley's first. First of all, and we will talk about this a little bit more in the next item in terms of the giga-fibre network that we are put the initial seed investment into. And I think his question was, well, what can the council add by stepping into this arena? Well, we've covered this in a tremendous amount of detail previously, but fundamentally, what we can add is, first of all, we will have control over the network, so we can actually connect our a lot of the public sector up in a way and have control over that in a way that we wouldn't be able to. And that was the predicated part of the business case with which we initially invested this into as well. The extra parts that we're talking about here are kind of above and beyond that, the kind of extra benefits to that investment rather than why we originally stepped into this arena. We can also, as Councillor Hadley pointed out, look at those areas that are not being covered by the private sector per se. They're slightly harder to reach areas, and we will make sure that we prioritise those as part of the investment into the network. And then, as we'll talk about in the next paper, that the real aim of the business model that's been put here is to pull together a number of the operators that are working in this arena, and the neutral host model that we're being taking through in the next paper has already generated significant private interest. So we wouldn't be pursuing it if there weren't interested parties. It's as simple as that. And again, that's actually a golden thread throughout all of these interventions. We will note, and it was said at the beginning, this is about creating a self-sustaining, privately funded business model. Well, guess what? They don't get off the ground unless the private funding is there. So I think if there's any questions over whether the private interest is there, well, if it isn't there, then they don't happen. It's pretty much as simple as that. And credit to Adrian's team, a tremendous amount of background work has gone into this. And the fact that we've got some, pretty sharp figures in here, they haven't been plucked out of the air. They are because there is significant interest into progressing these forwards. I don't quite agree with Councillor Hadley's a dismissal of the app demonstrators that we've been doing across the area. We've garnered international, national and international recognition for some of those. And granted, they are at the first step in the water, but they are already making a difference, showing what is possible, and not only helping with some immediacy to improve services, and we've all got a role to play in publicising them further, but as evidenced by a number of businesses that I've spoken to recently that have relocated to the area on the back of that level of innovation, they demonstrate what is possible. And again, you know, local authorities cannot and should not do anything. Do everything. We should do anything, but we shouldn't do everything. And the ability to harness what are amazing companies to do some of that, I think is absolutely the right thing to do. Moving on to the comments about 5G. It's absolutely not true that there is no data around the pilot that we did in Lansdowne. Quite the opposite, actually. There has been a website up since its inception that gives real-time monitoring to the levels of background stuff that 5G throws out, and despite a lot of concerns from some people, that has showed that there's the very, very minimal impact to that. And the fact that we've gone out there on the front foot and put all that information on there, anybody can log on to at any time and see exactly where the levels are, I think shows that openness and transparency. It also shows that I think a lot of the concerns are entirely unfounded. And I also actually disagree that there has been absolutely no consultation done on 5G across the area as well. Councillor Butler will remember that when I was chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, when we were in opposition, I actually hosted a call for evidence of 5G that was an extended period where we invited people from all sides to present all parts of the argument, health, economic benefits and everything, and then brought recommendations out of that. So we have, even when in opposition, done extensive amounts of work on that. I personally think the point has been proven, that as far as everything goes, and that's why we've got the extra monitoring in place and the real-time monitoring, there are no health concerns. And whilst I appreciate that some countries may have banned it, some countries have banned women driving, and I'm not sure whether that's necessarily the right thing to do. That was an accidental pause there, Chairman. But fundamentally, what we've got here is incredible interventions, leveraging a huge amount of work that's been going on throughout both the council and private industry. We are consistently ranked as one of the top areas and regions of the country for digital innovation, digital startups and SMEs in this region, and it's absolutely right that we set the strategy going forward and we commit to working and fostering those businesses in the future to make a real difference to real people.
Absolutely great. Okay, so thanks ever so much. So, and I think it's worth just underlining, you know, 2 points there. Really, one, you know, we are building on the works of preceding authority, particularly Bournemouth, who have long time led in the space, and also, you know, I would really just like to echo your thanks to Adrian Hale and his team. It's a case of a small team doing incredible work, and I'm really, really proud to be working with them. So, you know, thank you very much to those guys. Okay, so now it's just left for us to vote on the paper. So can I ask all those in favour, please show. Great, and that again is unanimous. Thank you very much. And back to you, Phil. You've talked a little bit about it in the preceding paper, but agenda item 8, accelerating gigabit fibre.
Thank you very much, Chair. I won't go on too long about this one. We've trailed a lot of the reasons why we've done gigabit fibre. What this paper is doing, it's includes in the title, is accelerating and going even further. When we brought forward our future fund intervention and investment into the gigafibre space, it was predicated around a business case of predominantly council services, but actually our significant investment into this area opens up huge other possibilities. And again, Adrian's team, Adrian and Dave Reynolds as well, have done a really good job of looking at how we can use that fibre investment to open up wider access to the market and therefore enable a much better service for people across the BCP region. Within that, we are recommending to move to something called a neutral host operator model. It is a little bit different than how the UK telecommunications market has worked to date, where normally you have a particular organisation that funds, installs and runs its own fibre networks a bit like Virgin Media have done, or City Fibre, and actually it decouples the digital fibre infrastructure from the actual services that are delivered on it. And we've done a tremendous amount of market testing behind the scenes to see if there would be interest within this space, and we've got a lot of interest back. So what we're proposing here is to go to procurement to set up a neutral host operator model. Table 1 on the report demonstrates a little bit how it will work, although I appreciate will go over most people's heads. And then by procuring that neutral host operator, we can then take that forward, make sure that we get the right system in place, and that will open up a number of different service providers essentially to work together and have access to that network. This is a model, incidentally, that it's not new. It is used in other countries really well, and indeed actually we've been working really closely with government on this, because there are other exemplar areas in the country. I believe Stoke-on-Trent in particular was one of the areas that has trialled this. They actually got government funding from I believe DIT or one of the government departments to take this forward. We believe we can do this in-house, and we've been working really closely with both the government, and we had really senior people from government come down recently with a conference that we hosted on this, but also the team in Stoke to learn the lessons from there. But again, that has really opened up their broadband inclusivity, both in terms of its reach, but also other businesses getting involved in this as well. Tremendous amount of work behind the scenes, tremendous amount of work to be done after this. What we're asking for today is Cabinet to give the approval to actually work with the procurement team and procure a gigabit fibre neutral host operator.
Great, thank you very much. And what I'll do, I'll formally second that now and move to our wider council colleagues for comment, and I'll bring Councillor Hadley back in first. Andy.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I come back to what are we actually doing? What is the real benefit of us getting involved in this? In Scandinavia, they have a lot of very good social models for the way in which they spend money and consistency. And you need some clout with the network providers to actually get the benefits out of this. So if it means one set of fibres that all of the providers use, then great. That's a good thing, rather than having the current chaos we've got with City Fibre and perhaps further private sector telephone companies coming along and digging up the street. But we need them to take part, and I really worry that actually by inserting a neutral host operator, a lot of the benefits that we claimed when we spent £5.5 million last year, and the £8 million that's highlighted within the previous paper you've just passed. Yes, of course, the private sector will be interested in accessing public resources at a discount rate, and they will be looking to drive a hard bargain with us in terms of the savings we might think we make and the income that they think they might make from hosting this and running it and extracting the benefit from it. So I really fear that we are having stepped out on a process of funding some of this stuff ourselves. Yes, it's sensible to have someone else light it, because frankly, and as I said at the time, I didn't think we should be investing the previous money. But I'd quite like to understand whether the £8 million in the previous paper you just passed is superseded by this approach, which says that it's going to be zero cost. I think that's just the procurement, but what is the likely cost benefit for the council taxpayers? There are some really worrying statements in there. There's a requirement for a symmetric service. Well, if you look at in the trade press, they talk about operators just throttling back the download speed to the equivalent of the upload speed. Actually, you want both the download and upload to be fast and as fast as you can make it. On page 176 of your pack, it says it's not been possible to discover any government buying standards applicable to the telecoms industry. It took me about 5 seconds to access the government technology standards and guidance design principles, including chapters on public service networks. I'm really concerned that again we are being sold a pup here, or we are stepping into an area we don't have the expertise, rather than saying on a spot basis and having the freedom to be able to move between different suppliers of the technology in the way in which your IT teams have been doing for decades, taking the changes in technology availability, the changes in bandwidth, and buying in the market rather than stepping into something that we will be stuck in. Thank you.
Okay, Thank you very much, Andy. Don't necessarily agree, but we'll come back to some of those comments as we get through it. So no other. Let me just check. There's a hand up. Is that? That's Andy's hand. Okay. So then I'll open it up to council colleagues. And first, please, Toby Johnson. Toby.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader. Yeah, no, as the Deputy Leader said, this has real levelling up implications. I just want to touch on those briefly. I think, firstly, it's a really good example of what levelling up is, and certainly what we've taken it to be as an administration. For anyone who's still obviously a little bit confused about what levelling up might be, and it shows its real nebulous nature, the non-corporeal nature of levelling up. It's not a thing in and of itself. It's about landing the positive long-term ground level impacts that every development that we do can have, and it's about landing them in the right place. And certainly in this, closing the digital divide has a huge impact can have a huge impact on quality of life for all of our residents through access to services, communication with everything important, i.e. families, doctors and friends. It can take a lot of weight off our council services if people are able to do a lot of the research and things from their own home and make those communications from their own home. And targeted in the right way, it can massively help us tackle digital inequality across our conurbation. Allowing the low-income households to access the same quality of digital infrastructure is a real step to tackling a form of inequality that's often overlooked. It's not one that people think about a lot, but it is a really big problem. And on top of the quality of life benefits that it can have, there are obvious economic and business benefits that have already been touched on. You can't do good work and good business if it takes 10 minutes for Google to load. And just touching on the levelling up goals that we obviously work with the Purpose Coalition, and touching a little bit on the first paper that came through today, goal 10 of the levelling up goals, 40% of the agreed actions that we agreed to when we joined the coalition less than a year ago are already completed, and all of the rest are on target. So it's something that this administration can be really proud of, that we are tackling well. So thank you, Leader.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, and I really endorse the work we've been doing with the Purpose Coalition as well. It was great to do some work with them in Harrogate with you. Okay, so do I have any other members wishing to speak on this? I'll hand back to you to sum up, Phil.
Yes, thank you very much. And again, thank you to Councillor Hadley for your questions. I think the short answer to the question, does this supersede or impact on the work that we did previously, is absolutely not. To use a clumsy analogy, if you built a train line to your private house and you only ran one train an hour, and then somebody says, can we run train services on that and pay you some money for the other 59 minutes of the hours, would you say yes? You absolutely would. There's tremendous capacity, and that's actually, as it makes clear in the summary of financial implications, and as Councillor Hadley actually said himself, paragraphs 29, 30 and 31, this places no additional direct financial obligation on the council. The commercial risk of running the wholesale broadband network in BCP would sit wholly with the procured neutral host operator, is not underwritten by the council not responsible, would not underwrite any investments return of investors, and again, as with any fibre owner, should we decide to make those assets available as we would under the NHO, then we would get additional financial return on top of that. So I think in summary, the market is clearly very, very interested within this. It costs us absolutely nothing to do. We've already got the funds as part of the previous process to do this. And so it costs us absolutely nothing, and we've got ultimate huge amounts of spare capacity. I really don't understand what is not to like on this. As with all this other smart place interventions that we talked about in the last paper, the onus very much falls on the private sector, and Adrian and the team have done fantastic work in drumming up a really significant amount of interest in this. We would not be bringing this paper forward if we didn't have the confidence that it was deliverable, that it would bring in financial returns and improved outcomes. And it didn't cost the council any further money. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, great, hugely positive story, and it just shows us going first again, doesn't it? And being positive and actually delivering, which is great. Okay, so thank you for other members' comments as well on both those papers. We now move to vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That again is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so I will move now to agenda item 9, which is housing subsidiary companies business update, which I believe is yourself, Phil, and then Councillor Rampton. Phil.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is the paper that looks at the four companies, four of the companies that we have: Seascape Group Limited, Seascape South Limited, Seascape Homes and Property Limited, and BBML Bournemouth Building and Maintenance Limited, and looks at their growth plans and ambitions for the year. This is a fairly regular paper, and the recommendation is to support the plans that have been put forward by the two Seascape Group subsidiaries and BBML, and also approves the refined terms of references for them as well. I think my colleague Councillor Rampton will talk a little bit more about some of the work that's been going on within them. Within Seascape Group Limited itself, which is the overarching company for SSL and SHP, we had an away day recently where we went through in firm detail the business plans and opportunities that we have within these companies that are performing really very well, Chairman, to try and refine what their future growth plans looks like. I'll pick up Seascape Homes and Property Limited in particular, of which I'm chairman. Tremendous amount of work that's gone into that since its inception. For those that don't recall, we set up this company back in the Bournemouth days specifically to deal with the terrible situation of people finding themselves homeless, there not being properties available, and them having to be put up in bed and breakfast. It's just not good enough. It costs the council a tremendous amount of money, and it's not good for those people that found themselves in that very, very vulnerable position. So a little bit like the general thrust of this administration, we stepped forward, set up this company, and invested in residential property so that we could give people that find themselves in that position homes as a stepping stone for the future. So it improves the outcomes for them. It significantly reduces the financial burden of having to put people into inadequate bed and breakfast. And crucially, that investment into those residential properties invests in long-term assets for the future. So generates a direct and immediate financial return, as well as a much longer financial return in hundreds of new assets across what will be, as we're expanding it, the BCP region. One thing that's a little bit lost in some of the papers from the council-owned companies is actually the overall savings that have taken place as a result of that intervention. And recently we're doing some behind the scenes work of the amount of money that the Seascape Group, Seascape Homes and Property intervention alone has saved the council, and it's saved the council around £7 million over the lifetime, and that is quite aside from the profit it generates, and that's quite aside from that aforementioned investment. So it's clearly been doing very well. We're now expanding the remit of that company. We're investing as a local authority into the private rented sector, and Seascape Homes and Property are taking on the lead role in that, and also now acting as a delivery vehicle for directly built homes on council-owned land. And we've seen through our CNAS papers how much further we're going on that, delivering over 1,000 council directly delivered homes on top of our regeneration ambitions. So the proposals coming from Seascape Homes and Property talk about how they're going to increase their capacity for both PRS and those new street properties over the coming years, as well as how they're managing the extra work that they're doing within the PRS region because of our Princess Road development, the Carter's Quay development in Poole, which we're really pleased to be at the groundbreaking for only last week. That's 161 local homes for local people, as well as the extra work that we're doing in homelessness move on accommodation, as Councillor Rampton has talked about. So that's Seascape Homes and Property. Again, we're looking at further reports from both BBML and Seascape South Limited, which my colleagues will talk about a little bit more. And also finally within this paper, as I mentioned, terms of reference update and group governance update. We will be taking a full review of the board composition later on this year, making sure that the skills matrix we've got for those boards, particularly with our non-executive directors, really help to match the expansion of these businesses as they become more and more successful into the future. So really positive update. There's an awful lot within these papers, but I think it shows that the decisions that were made some time ago about setting up these municipally owned companies to do things that are just not possible within the council shows that it's the right thing to do, and we're now seeing the fruits of that success.
Great to hear it. Thank you so much. And move to Councillor Hampton now to come in second, I believe.
I will second. Very happy to. Thank you, Chair. And I'll say a few words about BBML. I certainly won't have as much to say as my colleague, so BBML set up 8 years ago, and as the report says, it reports to Cabinet. There's a board of directors, and I'm one of those, and as Councillor Nigel is on the call, and he is another one, and I chair it. So it's a wholly owned company which directly employs many council operatives across services who repair and maintain our council housing and our corporate buildings. It generates a financial surplus. We've just looked at the corporate performance report, and so it supports some of those initiatives within our Fulfilled Lives arena as well as others. The surplus is returned to the council. The employment model, part of transformation, working with KPMG to have a look at that and consider what might be the best model going forward. The financial information shows a very healthy position, but I just want to point out that is still in draft and subject to audit. So asking you today, asking Cabinet today, Chair, to look at the terms of reference and to support those. But yeah, heartily endorse this paper. It's a good one, and it's one that is worth a good read because there's a lot going on there, as my colleagues already said. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. So, to any wider debate, do I have anybody looking to come in at this point? Okay, I'll bring Councillor Nigel Brooks. Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's all credit to the operatives and the management of Seascape South Limited, where I'm a director, and also BBML. In the appendix, you will see the financial report and the financial results. And it's quite interesting to see, as regards Seascape South, that they have increased their turnover by some 9,000 against the backdrop of difficult trading and difficult circumstances of COVID in the year to 31st of March 2022. A lot of this income is coming from disability facility grants. That's where we can go in and adapt properties for disabilities, and that is making up quite a sizable proportion of the turnover. But in addition, there's external construction work which is undertaken by Seascape South, and they have very good connections now with a lot of the academies and education sector, which I hope into the future will be a very fruitful area for additional work. There's also work which is undertaken for Tricuro, which is again another partnership company which we work with through BCP. As regards BBML, I think again the financial results just show how important this particular arm's length company is in delivering profit back to the parent BCP. In again the year to actuals 21-22, the net surplus for all its work was some £317,000, which is very strong compared to net surpluses in previous years. And the importance of this, it's been a dividend, allows a dividend to actually be passed over to BCP for its support and for its setting up of this particular company. It also means for BBML that there is retained profits, which are again going into reserves for future expansion and delivery of services of this particular company. So in both companies, I commend the teams on the ground. I commend the management for what actually they're delivering, which we know in construction terms is always a very difficult area, particularly against the backcloth of the economic situation we find, and also coming out of COVID. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you very much for that. So I don't have any other colleagues showing now, so we will move to Philip. Anything you want to say and sum it up, or if not, we'll move to the vote. Okay. So all those in favour, please show. Very much so. Thank you very much. That again is unanimous. Right, let's move to the agenda, which is agenda item 10, harmonising community infrastructure levy. Again, it's Phil, I believe you're introducing it, and Councillor Kelly will be seconding. Phil.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Largely a paper about structure. Community infrastructure levy, as colleagues know, will be the money developers can contribute towards funding of infrastructure to help support new development. We currently operate 3 legacy approaches in the implementation of the levy, which is clearly not good enough. But we're going to be looking at delivering a single policy approach eventually. What we're trying to do in this document is look at some of the kind of operational sides of the SIL and harmonise it across the BCP region. So to be really clear, not changing the amounts of SIL collected, which are different across areas, but trying to bring a much more harmonised approach, particularly around how we can collect it and things like payment in kind and discretionary relief as well. Recently attended a agents and developers forum where we spoke to, because generally affects the development community, who were quite positive about this change. Really, it gives much more clarity across the BCP region. So not tremendous changes in terms of the background policy, very much more of an operational requirement, but happy to take any further questions, Chair.
Great. Okay, Councillor Kelly, Jane.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yeah, the harmonisation of the SIL system from the 3 legacy councils is very welcome, as this process, which is happening right across all our departments and systems in the council. Clarity in the way that the overall strategic SIL should be managed is essential for equality of provision across all areas and clarity for applicants to our planning department. I'm involved with the neighbourhood SIL applications, and so smoothing the path to enable our ability to distribute funds to worthy and appropriate community projects across BCP is very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great. Okay, so let's see any other colleagues wishing to speak, and I'll go first to Councillor Judy Butt-Jubes.
Oh, thanks very much. With regard to the SIL draft payment in kind policy that sits within this, looking at the report, Bournemouth and Poole remained silent on the matter. He didn't confirm or deny whether payment in kind would be something that they'd be interested in or would be accepted. Payment in kind can allow developers, users and authorities to have more certainty, obviously, about the timescale over which certain infrastructure items will be developed. But before, hopefully, the draft policy is agreed, can we please hear whether Bournemouth and Poole intend to adopt and utilise the payment in kind facility? As I feel surely if we're to have harmonisation of SIL and a parity of provision, which is key and very process-based, all areas must surely agree that they're happy, if it's appropriate, to see this as a vehicle regarding SIL developer payments. And further to that, we've been advised of the benefits of PIC, but are there any negatives? And if there are, what are they? Thank you.
Great, thank you. I've actually got one question myself, so I'll come in now, and perhaps if now with colleagues you can sum up. So yeah, so it's a comment as much a question actually in relation. I mentioned earlier on about the ICB and how we're really pleased to be really taking an active role in that, and for everybody that's the integrated care concept, and how all health partners, including local authorities, can come together to deliver better outcomes for everybody across Dorset. There's a really, we look at SIL and strategic SIL as it's not just for our projects, it's for also the whole, sort of health infrastructure. And I noticed in here there's the comment around where the limits on that in terms of how we can partner with our health partners at the moment. I just, my report back to Cabinet is that I think we're getting much more confidence in terms of our partnership and our partnership working, and how that's a mutual two-way process. So I'm actually hopeful that this is more of a work in progress in terms of how we can actually come forward, maybe much further and go much further than we have done in the past by bringing forward SIL and also infrastructure pieces like the Futures Fund to actually go further with our health colleagues if it's going to drive better outcomes. So I think there's an ambition from us to go into that partnership and deliver more than we have done historically through SIL. So we need to look at how we can deliver and support them through SIL, but we can go further as well, as long as it's part of that genuine partnership across health that would benefit all of our residents, and we're very keen to play a strong role in that going forward. Okay, I'm not seeing any other people coming, so maybe just comments to that, and also Councillor Butt's questions as you sum up. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, on your point, I completely agree. In particular, the NHS are keen to try and access some of our SIL pot. The SIL pot is quite restricted in general. We've got a number of different calls on that SIL pot, so it has been a bit difficult. But as you've said, with the new integrated care model we've got, it's we've got a really good working relationship now with our colleagues in the NHS. But B, as we've identified, SIL is not the only route for infrastructure funding. And now that we've got a really combined way of looking at how we fund infrastructure across BCP, both through SIL, through other pots that come from government that we bid for, and through things like the Futures Fund, combine that with the amazing new relationship we've got with our partners across the public sector. And I think that SIL is not the only answer. So it might well be that the draw on funding is too much from SIL to fund certain things. But I think now that we're having those discussions in the round, we can and should go much further, because we are all in this together, and it's great to see your leadership in that area. On Councillor Butt's point, completely really interesting and good question. Within this paper there is a new draft payment in kind policy, and to answer your first question, yes, whilst Bournemouth and Poole have been silent on the matter previously, this paper does cement that payment in kind could be acceptable across the whole BCP region. So it's currently explicit that it can be accepted in certain circumstances in Christchurch. This paper harmonises that across the area, so payment in kind will be possible across Bournemouth, Poole and Christchurch. And again, as you've identified, there's certain instances where that is a positive intervention, but equally it has to come out and around. You asked a question about what negatives there are. One of the negatives in that if the local authority obtains land instead of SIL money, well, that places the onus on the council to hold that land for a specific purpose that could take some time to deliver on, so that the kind of onus falls onto the council instead. And that's one of the decisions that we'll have to take. And that's why sometimes it is better to have that money in hand, which allows a little bit of greater flexibility for what we want to spend it on. However, as it says in the report, sometimes it actually leads to a quicker outcome, and if we can identify specific uses for that, then that can be really positive. And again, another negative is that if we do hold land, there are associated risks and costs of holding land, such as security and things as well. So that's why it remains an option and is now an explicit option. But as you correctly identified, there are pluses and negatives to each version, and I think keeping it as one of the possibilities, we will be using it in some instances, but clearly in probably a majority of the time it is better to collect those funds so we have a greater flexibility on how we can deliver those infrastructure improvements that benefit people.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that's really helpful. I'll now move to the vote. So all those in favour, please show. Again, thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so we are moving now to agenda item 11, which is the BCP local plan update and way forward, which again is yourself, Bill.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is a really important paper because this outlines both the work that we've done to date on the preparation of the BCP region's first local plan, and in particular the very, very engagement heavy approach that we've taken in complete contrast to many local authorities, and also fleshes out some of the steps for not just the timeline that we're working on the future, but how we go about preparing the new draft local plan and how we'll continue to do that in a collaborative, transparent and cross-party way as well. So firstly, I'll talk a little bit about the engagement to date. Colleagues will be aware that we ran the second major consultation. We haven't even started work on the local plan yet, and yet we ran a second issues and options consultation earlier on this year. And the real clear aim of that was to get a steer from local businesses, local people, as well as the development community for the issues that they thought were important to them. So we're in listening mode prior to actually starting work on the draft local plan proper. Now, as referenced, that's quite a different approach to many local authorities. Most do a kind of quick and dirty issues and options consultation to start with. We did inherit a quick and dirty issues and options consultation, which is why we decided to go and do a much more deep one as a second go. And then a lot of authorities then go straight into a draft local plan and do the heavy consultation on that. We thought it was very, very important, particularly as this was the first local plan for BCP before we started work, to get that steer, particularly from the public, about the areas that they thought would be important to them. And within that document as well, we also set out that the 10 main areas that were going to be either our key areas for opportunities or key issues, so that we could, if possible, if there was only one way forward, kind of test that with the public, but if there were options, to get some feedback on the options. First of all, in terms of how well this was received, this was, as I understand from the engagement team, one of, if not the most engaged with process that the BCP Council has ever done. Certainly BCP Council on its own, and certainly the biggest planning one that has ever been taken part in, especially when you consider that we weren't actually engaging or consulting on proposals here. This was about give us your feedback pre-local plan. So we had almost 1,000 full survey responses, which I think took everybody by surprise. We weren't expecting that number of the full survey responses, as well as 250 odd letters and emails. What was really interesting as well, particularly as people now interact in different ways, is the thousands and thousands of people that interacted with the digital forums, as well as those either paper or full consultation documents. We had almost 13,000 people visit the website throughout the process, which I think is even more than some local authorities get on their draft local plan itself. Nearly 1,300 people put individual comments on the individual sites that have been promoted to us, and as a reminder, we put every site that has been promoted to us out there for public consultation so that we could get true feedback. We had Facebook Live, we had podcasts, we'd really gone above and beyond, and I think the engagement team were really happy, considering this is a pre-local plan engagement, with the amount of people that got involved within that. We then therefore got some really good feedback on some of the areas that we want to then use to help shape the local plan in the future. By and large, Chairman, in the 10 areas that we highlighted that we thought were important, and where we put forward suggested initial ways of action, that there was really very high agreement that people thought they were the right priority. So things like regenerating our town centres, adapting our high streets, conserving and protecting our habitats and biodiversity, more on that later, as well as things like carbon neutrality and infrastructure investment, all carried 70, 80, 90% approval ratings for people saying that this was really important. A couple of areas of interest that didn't carry as much public support. One very surprising one was the objective to provide a sufficient supply of affordable homes to meet the different needs of our communities. Interestingly, only 53% of those who took part in the survey thought that providing affordable homes to meet the needs of our communities was important. That is interesting, perhaps reflective of the demographic of those that responded, and I'll come on to that in a little bit. And we're also we've had a split of feedback on parts of the vision, in particular the reference to our kind of coastal city region. A lot of people liked that phraseology. A lot of people didn't like that phraseology. But as we've already discussed in other forums, I think we're now starting to refer more to our coastal region, or BCP region. That city region, although we're considered about that, but government is very good for inward investment, very good at talking to government, but actually I think reflect it, people more connect with the BCP region than anything else. Other than that, really high levels of engagement, and this will be absolutely critical with those thousands of responses to shaping how we go forward with the next step of the local plan. One final comment, as I've said, about the demographic. We do have some improvements that we can make going forward. We started this process, incidentally, during COVID, where we weren't sure how much physical aspects of the consultation we're going to be able to ramp up. As the restrictions came down, we were able to ramp it up significantly, and there was a worry from a lot of the public that because it was there's a lot of digital aspects, that meant that a lot of particularly the older population wouldn't get involved. We actually ended up having the entire opposite problem, Chairman, in that we had a very intense amount of feedback from the more experienced of our generations, but actually we're still finding it very difficult to get through to some of the younger people that will obviously quite often be impacted by some of these proposals, and some geographical issues as well, in that some of the areas that will face the most intense densification on brownfield sites into the future, which is completely right to save our open spaces, were those areas that didn't give us as much feedback, whereas those in the more rural areas that we're protecting were very vocal. So work to do there, but more on that in the future. Finally, Chairman, the next steps in terms of the local plan, we've done some work on how we should be preparing the local plan with external partners as well, and the paper talks about keeping that local plan creation within the team that we've got. We've got a crack team that have been working really hard on that, so we'll be bolstering the team to create the local plan going forward. Because that engagement heavy approach has gone so well, and because we're really committed to do that in the future, it felt right to extend the timeline of the local plan process as well. So push it back another year so that we can continue that cross-party consultative approach into the next draft local plan stage. So actually, rather than try to quickly work towards a draft local plan this year, we'll now work towards it next year. And then finally, we were really with some of the external advice that we've got, we were really praised for the cross-party work that we've done on this. We want to commit to that in the future. So instead of that local plan cross-party working group that we had being as part of the a kind of a subgroup of overview and scrutiny committee, now that we're going into the local plan creation process, the advice that we've had would be to build that into a local plan advisory group, pretty much hopefully with the same members. I'm certainly really keen for the chairman, Councillor Mike Brooks, Liberal Democrat chairman, to continue in that role. He's done a very good job, and then that would feed into a new working group, a local plan advisory. So we'd have a local plan working group, which would become the local plan advisory group, and then that would feed into a local plan delivery board, which again would have members of that working group within there as well. So all of the details in the paper about how we wish to go forward to the next stage, but really great feedback that we've got from the public. This, I think, gives us a really solid base, having listened to people, to focus on the areas that they like, focus on the areas that they don't like, and now come up with a draft local plan that is absolutely representative of what local people, local businesses want as we create our new local plan, which is more than just where we want to build things. It is very formally our plan for our place. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'll formally second that. I just nothing to add really. I think just one reflection from me was I think when we came in as an administration, the initial, I think it was the speech is sort of introducing us. We talked very much about putting residents at the heart of everything we wanted to do. It's great to see we're really walking in those shoes, because this is absolutely a case where it'd been very easy, wouldn't it, just to have gone and done another local plan piece of work. But what we wanted to do is to absolutely go and invest in that time up front with residents as well. So I'm really glad we've been able to do that. You know, we said it consistently, right, not rushed, and this, you know, putting residents at the heart of this is absolutely the right thing to do. So very happy to see that. Okay, now I'll open up to any colleagues who would like to speak. Do I have anybody wishing to come in on this paper? And perfect timing when we're talking about engagement. We're bringing our lead member for engagement. Oh, sorry, I do apologise, Jude. We've got a non-cabinet member who would like to speak first, and we have to bring them in before we come in as a cabinet. So if you just hold that, and I will come to Councillor Butler. Diana.
Hello, sorry. Yes, talking about engagement, I was thinking, you know, we need better engagement with young people especially, and maybe actually going to places where they are, like educational establishments and things like that. The public objections, I think, to affordable homes is this title is bandied about quite a bit, and really affordable is generally about 80% of market rate, which is still very expensive for people in this area, because we are in quite a high cost area for rent and for buying of homes. So affordable to most people still means a lot of money. I think we need to look more at social housing or other affordable ways of having a home. I think that might be the reason for that. And also the other thing is, when we're having further engagement with our community, we've got a fantastic tool of the BCP News magazine. And after asking about when the next issue is coming out, it's not due until spring next year. Well, surely that could be used for engaging with the community to find out what people think, and we could have a page or at least an article on the local plan in that. So I feel that's very underused as a good way of getting to people that wouldn't maybe engage through the other forms that you've already listed. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that. And also now I've got Councillor Richard Burton showing, so I'll go to Richard first. Morning, Richard.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for letting me speak. See if I get my camera working. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I wasn't going to actually speak on this, but just a couple of points, because I represent, I think, one of the wards that had one of the largest number of respondents on this. And I am also delighted at the number of respondents, although also slightly disappointed, because I would think that more of our community would want to respond to this. I know we as ward council did a lot of work encouraging people to respond in Bearwood and Merling, I think it did have an effect, but I still think it wasn't enough. I would totally agree we don't have enough young people responding, and I think it's a common problem with all these sort of trying to get the voice of the young. Whether it's on the doorstep, whether it's on these sort of things. One thing I would share, there was a term overrepresented used a number of times in this report. I know that there's a certain amount of annoyance within the ward that they feel that we are being overrepresented just because a lot of people responded. I also think that the idea of affordable housing, you're quite right, that needs unpicking. That was a surprise to me. I think we need to have a look at the reasons why people said that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely, and agree. You need to break down what's behind some of those figures as well. Okay, great. Jude, thanks ever so much for your patience, and over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Firstly, before my question, clearly, Phil, you stress how important that this particular matter is, and the length and breadth of the remit is absolutely acknowledged. Just to go back to Councillor Diana Butler's point with regard to engagement. Engagement with schools is key, clearly. It's already been mooted, already in train, but thanks for the prompt. Connected clearly with Becky Dade, Youth Parliament, was at a meeting last night. It was actually Councillor Richard Burton chairing, with regard to how to interact there. And the Youth Parliament vein is a very good way in which to start with engagement. Already out about the businesses, Parvlux in my own ward, seeing what's going on with regard to job creation and feeding that down to youngsters and how we can engage there. Conversation with schools is in train, and chairman of all residents groups, huge task, but that's also in train for me to go out and speak to them. So with regard to engagement, it's live and it's happening, but thanks for the prompt. My question sits around, clearly as lead member for community engagement, there's a key requirement to build on specific consultation, on the specific consultation process, the second one. But also, I'd like to go even further to make sure that it's been done really to a gold standard, the very best standard we can have. So based on that, Phil, what's your candid view? The leader was very honest previously on the consultation already undertaken. and the areas where we can obviously improve it, expand it. You can use whichever adjective you want. So as lead member, I can take that forward in real material terms. And my secondary to that is, can you also possibly share us the general outcomes regarding where engagement actually did work best amongst the 3 specific areas of BCP? So that's across the board. And did we hit those required targets using the WYSI digitalised approach to reach younger residents? I'm not sure that we did, but I'd like to hear about that. And were there any useful demographics regarding engagement and responses from our older residents in BCP and other specific groups? So sort of a cross-section answer I'd be grateful for. Thank you. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Okay, great. I don't have any other colleagues showing on this, so perhaps I'll come back to you, Councillor Broadhead, to sum up and answer some of those.
I'm so sorry, Leader. I actually have 2 other questions. I was putting the first. May I moot them, or can I ask them after Councillor Broadhead has answered my question?
What we tend to do is allow the portfolio holder to sum up and in that answer the question. So if you could put the full amount of questions now, that would be great, Jude. And then Phil will take them in his summing up. Jude.
You're very kind. The work thus far regarding local plan has been completely cross-party. We heard about that earlier, actually, from you, Councillor Broadhead, and that's really enabled the delivery of the initial consultational outcome. But as we journey further, landing these initial outcomes relevantly, can we be assured that the close cross-party working relationship will remain in train in real terms? And my last question is, we have a new government lineup, which is imminent in September. Elephants in the room, I'm afraid. So it's no secret that the approach to planning may and more than possibly will be modified. It's what happens, with probably more demands to be met. So is this council ready for this regarding the structures we already have in train to deliver the local plan? And is it thought that there will be such a significant step change, or is it thought that there might be such a significant step change that we could be set off course to deliver the BCP local plan? Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you very much. Phil.
Thank you very much to all those asked questions. Really good questions, actually. And as those that know me know, I could talk about the local plan forever, but I will try not to. Councillor Butt asked me for my candid view. It's always very dangerous to ask that, but on areas that haven't worked well or that we wish to improve in the future. I think the one reflection that the engagement team have had is, first of all, they're very encouraged by the level of responses that we have. It is a big ask when you are talking about a number of different areas and different sectors that you want to ask for people's views on, and even bigger because people even a bigger ask because people get very interested when there are direct proposals that absolutely impact them immediately. So much as we always want to get an early steer from people, it's often hard to infuse people to do that, whereas as soon as there are proposals on the table, well, they get really rather excited. So I think it's great to have you on board, because there are a number of areas where we will have to try and get people involved before proposals are directly on the table. I referenced earlier the younger population are the ones that are quite often the hardest to both reach and also to infuse. It says in this paper that we had I think 90% of respondents were of the kind of an older age groups, and they only represent about half of the population. Well, that's not good enough, but it pretty much always what happens with this type of consultation. So a little bit of extra work to do as we go forward to particularly get the younger population, and also to get people involved before there are immediate proposals that then will get very excited about. Your second question asked for areas that worked well in terms of that consultation. Just build on that point. We saw a number of very high levels of interaction from areas that had maybe a lot of sites that had been promoted as part of the call for sites. Now, we've taken a decision as the administration not to filter any of those out, so any sites that have been promoted to us, and let's be honest, most of those are probably never going to happen. We wanted to get an evidence base, both what the public thought or if we were objecting to them, rather than kind of sifting them out. And I think what we've seen is those areas that have had sites promoted to them quite often were the ones that had the best participation. That will be built upon as we go forward to the draft paper, because if we go forward to the draft paper and there are real proposals within there, then that's quite often when people start paying a little bit more attention. Your third point was about cross-party working, and absolutely, I referenced in the opening, we've been credited with our cross-party approach on this. It's worked very well to date. We had the issues and options consultation document that went out there that carried full cross-party support. Every single member of the political parties that were in that cross-party working group signed that document off. Maybe I'm being a little ambitious to think that a year out of an election that work will continue in the spirit that it was, but I think it's worth trying. And again, I'm really hopeful that this is too important to score political points over it. So we're committed to that. We're putting the governance structures in place to support that, and I just hope that everyone continues to play their part. And then your final point was about the government changes, and you're absolutely right. I think it is inevitable, and we've heard directly from the two final candidates to be our next Prime Minister recently, who have already said that there will be a change in direction with some of the planning reforms. That's another reason why giving us a little bit of breathing space by having, but instead of trying to finalise things this year, to give it to the end of next year to come up with a draft plan, gives us the ability to react to that. I sense from what I'm hearing from the candidates that there will be some changes on the housing numbers, and either no mandated housing targets or a slight relaxation in favour of a locally derived figure, which is exactly what our preference is and exactly what we're doing here. So I'm feeling quite confident actually that the approach that we've taken here, saying that a standard methodology with some errors in isn't quite good enough. We've got a locally derived figure that either works with the standard method and fixes the errors, or looks purely at a need-based approach, is exactly the thrust from what I'm seeing from the candidates. So I'm hopeful it's heading in the right direction. We've got the space, the time and the resource to be able to react to it. Just with regards to the other points raised by other members, Councillor Burton, I agree with the term overrepresented. Not my words, it's the words that the engagement team use, and I don't think it's meant to be as emotive as it sounds. I think when you have an area that represents a certain amount of population, and actually the responses were way over above that percentage of the population, technically they have been overrepresented compared to the overall demographic, but it's not meant to be a bad thing. And actually I would go so far as to say that it's less that your area is overrepresented and more that other areas are actually underrepresented. And again, as I referenced earlier on, I think the fact that we got very, very high levels of representation from areas where there are a lot of promoted sites shows that I think we can expect, as we firm the proposals up in the draft local plan, that the level of interaction in those underrepresented areas is likely to increase. And then the final point, it does actually talk in the report a little bit in greater detail about the reasons for the low level of interaction, positive response on the affordable home side. And I think rather than be two-dimensional and just say, oh, it's because a lot of people like pulling the ladder up behind them, and we've got a high percentage of responses from people who are homeowners and therefore they don't care about the next generation. I think it is a little bit more nuanced than that. Within that area, we also talked about meeting the different needs of our communities, and we were seeking opinions on things like self-build housing plots, providing the right mix of homes, should we allocate sites for travellers, and things like that. And a number of those areas didn't get a lot of enthusiasm for people. I mean, only 43% of respondents thought that we should be going a bit further on providing self-build housing plots. So I think that brings down that overall percentage in that area. I don't think we've got a vast swathe of the population in the BCP region that don't give two flying hoots about the next generation. I sincerely hope that's not the case. But the whole point of doing this really important and a really detailed survey and engagement is that we can look into that detail and make sure that we flavour the outcomes of that into the next steps. Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely great. Thank you very much, then, and really appreciate the detailed answers and the questions that came forward as well. Okay, so let's move this to the vote then. All those in favour, please show. And again, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so that moves us to agenda item 12, which is the Biodiversity Net Gain Task Force recommendation. Really interesting paper, and I'll come and make some comments on it in a minute. But Viv, you're introducing that, Phil, and Councillor Anderson will be seconding it. So, Phil.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I'd talk some more because I haven't done enough of that during the Cabinet meeting. This is a paper that I'm actually genuinely really excited about. That makes it sound like it's fake excitement for the other, but that's obviously not the case. 6 months ago, we brought forward a paper looking at reacting to the government's change in the Environment Act, that they would be mandating a 10% biodiversity gain, which had to be maintained for at least 30 years, and embedding that as in law, but giving councils a 2-year grace period in order to implement it. We'd said in that paper back in December 2021 that we really supported this, a huge increase in biodiversity net gain, particularly in an area like ours, 22 triple SIs, amazing natural environment, and a population that cares deeply about the place that they live, and the nature and the biodiversity is to be welcomed. But actually, that rather than wait for that 2 years, I was really keen that we not only went much quicker than that, but also that I think we've got a responsibility in this area, that we try and be one of the first upper-tier authorities in the country to embed biodiversity net gain, that 10% biodiversity net gain, for all planning applications at some pace. A couple of reasons to do that, as we said at the time. First of all, it's absolutely the right thing to do, and I think most residents would support that. So ideologically, we really wanted to get this in action as soon as possible. But secondly, and more pragmatically, it is actually a big change, and will not be easy in every circumstance. So I was much keener to go earlier and work out the gremlins in the system, particularly with the development community, and figure out how we actually get to a long-term solution by going early and working collaboratively, than just waiting for a cliff edge situation, embed it, and risk unintended consequences, such as not being able to provide homes for our next generation, because it was putting development off. What this paper does is cement that commitment. So 6 months ago, we said we would embed biodiversity net gain for all developments, and this paper does it. So we're enabling the early implementation by putting on the verification checklist that all relevant developments that come forward will now have to demonstrate a minimum 10% biodiversity net gain. And again, in the first instance, put the onus on the applicant to demonstrate that, whilst we come up with longer term solutions for how we wish to kind of embed a more structured approach to this. What the paper also does is gets the council ready and put some more funds that we put into this to make sure that we're both ready as a local authority for our sites that we will have to increase biodiversity net gain on, but also get the resource and the structures and the personnel in place so that we can manage this going forward. So one of those areas, Chair, where 6 months ago I said let's be one of the first in the country to go hard on biodiversity net gain, and with this paper we fulfil that commitment with bells and whistles.
Great, glad to hear it. And I'll bring in Councillor Mark Anderson. Now, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I would echo a lot of what Councillor Broadhead has said. We have proved with this paper that we are supporting and are committed to the commitment we made in the July 2019 climate and ecological emergency, and this is definitely putting our ecological face right at the forefront. There are quite a few things I'd like to say, not about the paper as such, but about the biodiversity area and why we should be doing this. And the main one I'd like to talk about is the fact that we are in an area of lowland heath, and it's the best local lowland heath in Europe. We used to have 50,000 plus acres of lowland heath stretching from Poole to Dorchester. That's been reduced to 15% now, and we need to preserve that, and we need to build on that. And more importantly, we need to support the biodiversity that is in that area. I mean, things like we have all 6 reptiles in the country are based in the heath. We have very rare birds such as nightjars. We have a whole raft of insects and orchids, and a whole raft of other plants that are really important. But also, I think what's important is the appendix that's associated with this paper. Generally, we find that we have an appendix that lists lots of facts on what you have to do and what you don't have to do. This appendix is a really nice, light paper, and it's really useful to anyone who's interested in biodiversity. I mean, it talks about some of the easy things you can do to provide extra biodiversity. It talks about hedge and tree plantings. It talks about pond creation, installation of bird and bat boxes, making hedge-friendly fences, insect and bee hotels, and also talks about reptile herbaculations, if I've got that right. And it details what you could do. It talks about grass planting, tree planting. There are links to areas so you can find out exactly what you need to do if you need further information. I think that this is probably one of the best appendices I've seen, and it's certainly readable. And I would recommend to not only all members of the Cabinet, but to all members of the public in the area that are interested in increasing the biodiversity of their gardens, of the area, that they read it and take a note of what the things are in here. So I'm very pleased to support it, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, for both of you. And you shot my fox, slightly in terms of one of the things I was going to talk. I'm going to talk a little bit about the climate emergency, but also as a ward councillor, with Heathland, as such an important part of it. It's actually about protect. We've seen a number of planning applications come forward, and we've been, sat in front of the planning committee wanting to say, well, actually, we don't just need a fig leaf over biodiversity and protecting these areas. We actually need to do it properly. And I think residents can see when things are coming forward with it doesn't take it seriously, and our residents, I'm sure residents in any Heathland and across the conurbation, absolutely value these areas, and we need to protect them, and this will enable us to do that. Again, it was touched on in the introductions, but I'll just add a sort of reflection from me. If we look at what we're actually doing in terms of the climate emergency, so one of the first things we did, we put the sustainability money back in. We then doubled it, made it permanent. Latterly, we brought forward a £20 million Green Futures Fund. So we're being one of the most proactive councils in the country in terms of our response to climate and ecological emergency. And now what are we doing? What we're doing today, or hoping to do today, is to land one of the first evidences, if not the first actually, in terms of hardwiring biodiversity net gain into our into our policies. So I'm really pleased with what we're actually doing. It's not about what we're saying; it's about what we're doing, and I take great pride in that. So thank all colleagues for their achievements in that. Okay, right. Anything else? Any other comments colleagues would like to raise on that paper? I'll bring in first people outside of the Cabinet, which is Councillor Diana Butler. Diana.
Thank you, Leader. From what Councillor Anderson was just saying, I'm pleased to hear all the descriptions of flora and fauna, and I'd like to say that I've been involved with the Pool and Bloom competition this year, and thrilled to see that there are people out in the community who are making environmentally friendly spaces, either people in their own gardens or people who are volunteering as little groups. So it is starting to really take off. So that's great. So, as if the council are concentrating on this will encourage local people as well. The one question I had was, why are we taking on a temporary ecologist for 18 months for this? I would have thought, as such a big council, and with this as such a big part of what we're hoping to do, why haven't we got an officer who is a full-time person who is experienced in ecology? I think that would be really useful for all the things we want to do. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Diana. I'm sure colleagues will come back on that. I was really pleased to say in the original budget that we were actually putting more resource into getting ecology officers in, so that there is further funding in there. I'll come now to Councillor Hadley, Andy, and then ask colleagues to sum up. Andy.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's very welcome that we are prioritising the ecology as well as the climate issue, because the two go together, and I think it's an important step. I think the other important step is how we deal with the existing estate, and it ties, I guess, to some of the things that Diana Butler was saying, but how we encourage nature-friendly corridors through people's gardens by making something of the appendix actually that Councillor Anderson referred to, in terms of what anyone can do. So not just about new developments, but about existing places, the inclusion of bird and bat boxes and insect houses, and go beyond the planning for new developments to our existing for 400,000 people across BCP. So I welcome the paper. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you, and agree. I think it's a real role for us in leadership, isn't it? You know, we can do it ourselves, but then it's also promoting how other people can take those steps as well. Thank you. Okay, no other colleagues are looking to speak on this, so I'll perhaps come back to Phil to sum up.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the widespread support on this. I think this is one that's really important to a lot of people, and our natural environment is clearly something we want to protect and enhance. But what we're actually doing within this paper is assuring that when development does take place, and it's absolutely right that we're building homes for the next generation, that we're actually increasing biodiversity whilst we are developing as well. So quite aside from all the work that we're doing to protect and enhance our incredible natural spaces, we're also now making sure that when we do develop, we are doing it that actually increases the provision for nature as well. So really very much the best of both worlds. With regards to Councillor Diana Butler's question about the resource. When we took the previous paper, we only gave an in-year budget of around 90,000 for biodiversity net gain, and we're hoping as part of the longer term budget setting for next year to make that a permanent position. But at this stage, we don't have that within the budget, so that's definitely part of the next plan. So that's the reason we've got a temporary contract for today, and in particular, their job will be to iron out a lot of the issues that we are going forward, setting up the new processes, so that then by that point we should have some clarity on what the final team will look like. Without boring you with the detail, it could well be that if the final biodiversity net gain baseline is done by the councils, for instance, that we will need to be more resource heavy on that, or it could be through some of the metrics that the government are working on, that the onus falls to industry to do that instead. So a lot of that will come out in the wash. So absolutely resourced for now, and we will be coming up with long-term plans sooner. Final point, Chairman, Councillor Anderson talked about the heathland earlier on and said it's really, the heathland is really important and we should build on it. For clarity, I think we're talking about building on the protection of the heathland rather than we love our heathland so much that we're going to build on it. But I'm just winding up, Mark. But clearly we all accept that we live in a great area, a fantastic natural environment, and the great thing about this paper is this doesn't say we shouldn't do anything. It just means that when we do it, we keep nature at the forefront and we make sure that that's right at the top of our agenda.
Great, Councillor Anderson.
Just for clarification, Chairman, as most councillors know here, including Councillor Broadhead, my long-term ambition would be to see us starting to turn the heathlands into a series of linked areas, so we don't need to protect it because it no longer needs protection.
Absolutely great. Thanks for your passion for the area. Okay, great. So let's move on now to the vote. So all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, and you can have a breath now, Phil. Thank you. Agenda item 13. I'm going to come to Councillor Mike White for the Youth Justice Service Annual Youth Justice Plan, and I believe Councillor Nicola Green will be seconded. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. This is an annual report which goes to Council, which includes the annual Youth Justice Plan. There are three key indicators we tend to look at when we're looking at the youth justice arena. The first one of these is the number of first-time entrants to the youth justice system, and I'm pleased to report that that continues to decline. The two other indicators we look at are trying to reduce reoffending and also minimising custodial sentences. These do tend to fluctuate a bit over time, but in general, both of those are running below the national average. This report's been reviewed in detail and unanimously supported by Children's ONS, so I'm very happy to ask Cabinet to recommend.
To second that, I don't have much to add, but I think it's just worth reflecting that the reason that this paper is so important and forms part of our key policy framework is that it does deal with a very small but a very vulnerable and very unique cohort of our young people, and it's quite right that we give it all the seriousness that it deserves for the impact it has on our communities and the young people themselves. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The chair of the Children and Young People's Overview and Scrutiny Committee now, Councillor Burton. Richard.
Thank you very much, Chair. Now, I'd just like to repeat what Mike said. We do fully endorse this report. I'd just like to just share with you, without going through the whole of our debate, because it was quite lengthy and interesting. The committee did find it a very readable report, and we're very grateful for that. Plus the discussion we had, there was a lot of things were highlighted. One particular thing, well, two particular things, permanent exclusions we talked about quite a lot, and this seems to be a strand through a lot of our debates in children's services. I would like to highlight that reducing the permanent exclusions for young people who are at risk of offending is vital here, because if they are excluded, they are much more likely to offend. One thing that we did find very interesting, looking at early intervention, the majority of young people who come to the notice of the offending teams, the first time they get noticed is not as offenders, but as victims, and as victim statements when they're younger and therefore suffer childhood trauma. So that is something which is quite understandable, but I would like to highlight. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, great, thank you, and appreciated. Okay, so let's that's all everybody who's raised. So then effectively move to the vote now. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's again unanimous. So that moves us on to agenda item 14, which is urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive, which I've had confirmed today that there is none. So we go to agenda item 15, which is the Cabinet Forward Plan. So the latest version of Forward Plan has recently been published. I think that was actually yesterday. So we can see that online. Any comments on that from colleagues or future iterations of that would be welcome. Now, I'll just quickly mention we had we're looking forward in the 1st September cabinet meeting to be bringing back the beach hut investment plan and paper, which we're doing. We had a plan to go to overview and scrutiny in advance of this actual cabinet meeting, but we took some representation from committee that due to some of the changes in government, that meant that we weren't, we hadn't quite finalised the updated part of that report. We were looking to the request was us to actually bring it back in early September, which we will do. So looking forward to that overview and scrutiny meeting then. The delays really positively, effectively, government have stood up and taken some notice of what we've been doing here. If we look back on what we've delivered to back-to-back council tax freezes, which is £11 million of money in our residents' pockets over 2 years, which looks increasingly like a good decision we took as a council when we look at the current cost of living crisis. And effectively, we were asked to come in and contribute to a discussion with Michael Gove, the Secretary of State, who was trying to understand how we are effectively the only council in the country who've been able to deliver on that. And my message when I was asked to contribute to that was, well, we've already, by coming through LGR, local government reorganisation, been able to deliver in the region of £50 million a year since 2019 of recurring savings, and then we've got a transformation programme which will deliver a further £50 million a year over the next 4 years. So if government were able to more positively support authorities to do the work we've done to transform, become efficient, and then we've got an opportunity to ask local government across the board to be able to join us on that journey. So we had an agreement effectively on the future funding of that transformation programme. Obviously, the events in Westminster changed that. We've now got a new Secretary of State. So my discussion with the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny was, while we're bringing those conversations forward with the new Secretary of State and other ministers, effectively, would it be better to come back fully in September, which we look forward to doing now. So thank government for their support and comments, and we're looking forward to finalising whether the beach hut investment piece will be targeted at funding our transformation programme as well as invested in the beach huts, or whether we'll be able to bring forward news of other government support in that area. So that'll be something we look forward to. I believe in our next cabinet meeting we've got 2 in September and in the early September. So anything else on the forward plan we'd like to? I've got Councillor Anderson, Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's useful to point out that we have the pool crematorium coming up in the September Cabinet, where we are going to be looking at seeing if we can reintroduce cremators into the pool crematorium and what the options are for that. This is a finalisation of our bereavement plan, which we brought a couple of years ago, where we're looking at the options for the whole of the bereavement service.
Great, I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And I think that's something we've been committed to for a long time. So if we can deliver on that, be excellent. Look forward to that. I've then got Councillor Nigel Brooks.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I see that there is quite a full agenda for the Cabinet meeting on the 28th of September. But I'm just going to highlight that I'm delighted to see that the Highcliffe and Walkford Neighbourhood Plan, which has been in preparation for 4 years, somewhat delayed by the pandemic, unfortunately, but after 4 years, we have had an external examination of the plan, and working very closely with BC planners and also a consultant appointed by the parish council. The document now is going to come before you on the 28th of September for approval, which then leads to the next step, which will be a referendum, all being well, of residents in the parish area as to whether they want to adopt the neighbourhood plan and make it a made plan. This is the first neighbourhood plan to come forward for the former Christchurch Borough Council area, and so I'm delighted that the report coming to you on the 28th of September has the potential of actually then leading to a made plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's great, and some really excellent work going in across those plans and also the high street work as well. Okay, so any further comments from anybody before I look to close the meeting? Just leaves me to thank colleagues and officers for the support, and we're very and members of the public for tuning in. We'll be back shortly and look forward to working with you all soon. Cheers. Bye bye.